Hello, Regis Kilbin is the name, and today I'm going to talk about my top 10 2-mana cards. These are the 2-mana cards that I think have been the most significant and impactful and really just the strongest cards in Hearthstone's history. So without further delay, let's go ahead and take a look at number 10. Up first is a card called Mech Warper. This 2-mana 2/3 minion has a pretty insanely powerful effect that your mechs cost 1 less, so it allows you to make some insane tempo plays by getting really expensive mechs out a turn or two sooner, so you can do insane stuff like Mech Warper into Mech Warper and play another 0-mana 2-mana mech, or like a 2-mana piloted shredder. All kinds of crazy stuff starts to happen when you get these on the board. Mech Warpers single-handedly have enabled decks like Mech Mage and Mech Shaman to be successful on the ladder. And just with the raw power of this card and its strong stat alignment, I think it will be a force for a long time, opening up that slot for mech decks to occasionally pop in and pop out as new mechs are added to the game. Up next, at the number 9 spot, is a card called Wild Pyromancer. This 2-mana 3/2 has another really powerful effect, and that's really what's going to define most of the cards on this list. After you cast a spell, deal 1 damage to all minions. Of course, that means your minions and the enemy minions. And Wild Pyromancer is used in control decks typically to help clean up the board really cost effectively, because you can use it to hit once or twice and essentially get a free area of effect spell out of a minion. And sometimes it's also just a nice 3/2 body to put on the board, so there's a little bit of flexibility. This card is used widely by control paladins in the past to combo with equality. They can clear the entire board with just a 4-mana combo that's only 2 cards, which is insanely powerful. But also by priests, it's very common to deal damage to your minions and set up card draw with big heals, or just allowing you to heal your side of the board while simultaneously destroying their side of the board. But that's not the only kind of decks that Wild Pyromancer has seen play in, so this card just has such a strong raw effect that it creates spots in so many different kinds of decks just based on its pure strength alone. Up next, at the 8-mana slot, is a Rogue card. Now this list will skew itself towards neutral cards in general, just because neutral cards are reliably better across a wider variety of decks, but any class cards that tend to show up in every single deck of that class in history are probably strong enough to make this list, as is the case with Eviscerate. This card is just so good for rogues that it's virtually in every rogue deck, whether it's a really aggressive early game rogue or a miracle type rogue or even a late game control kind of rogue. Eviscerate is going to make the cut just because it's so valuable. For 2 mana, you get to do 4 damage most of the time as long as you combo this card out. Sometimes even as a 2 damage 2-mana card, it's not that bad, but 4 damage for 2 mana makes it one of the most efficient direct damage spells in the game, which is great for rogues who are looking for some extra burst damage to kill their opponents, or to kill particularly scary minions that might be getting in their way. So Eviscerate is just so efficient and so impactful for its mana cost, and works so well with Rogue's kit that it certainly makes the list. Up next, at the 7-mana slot, is a Paladin card. Much like Eviscerate, this shows up in almost every Paladin deck these days, whether aggressive or mid-range or control. Shielded Minibot is really just kind of the best 2-drop in the game. It's not the best 2-mana card necessarily, but if you're looking to stick any card onto the board on turn 2 and hope that it stays around or trades effectively, that's exactly what Shielded Minibot is going to do for you. As a 2-mana 2/2, that doesn't sound that great, but the Divine Shield on this card is just so powerful, and 2 attack is enough to trade into most early game minions, and it sets up nicely for buffs. It's just so much about this card that's great and hard for opponents to deal with. It has mech synergies. Shielded Minibot is just core to Paladin early game and gave Paladins exactly what they needed, and I would argue this card single-handedly returned Paladins into a metagame where before the GVG era, they really didn't see much play. So Shielded Minibot is that strong all on its own. After that is another class card. This time around, it's from Warriors. It's Fiery War Axe. This card is so good that it's often just called the Fiery Win Axe. If Warriors get this card on turn 2, it usually just gives them such a strong tempo advantage because it's 3 attack twice over, so it usually trades 1 for 2 against multiple early game minions. So the warrior can kill 2 minions for only 2 mana and do so very efficiently with minimal cost to them. It's also just great in aggressive decks from time to time that want to pump out really cheap 6 damage for 2 mana. So Fireworks has a lot of flexibility and fits warriors quite perfectly, and if they get it on curve, it usually enables them to win games that they otherwise just would have never had a chance to win. So at the 5 mana slot is yet another class card. This time around it's the Mage's Frostbolt. This is another free card just like Fireworks. Similar in idea, it's 2 mana, deals 3 damage to a character, and freezes it. So Frostbolt's really kind of the ultimate 2 mana direct damage spell. When you compare it to something like a Dark Bomb that just does 3 damage, or a Quick Shot, this one has a pretty powerful effect that's never conditional, unlike Quick Shot. So sometimes this is just really good to clear minions out of the way if they're scary. Other times you'll be using it for burst damage to hit the enemy's face. Sometimes you'll just be using it for a freeze effect to deny a weapon attack or slow down a really big scary minion like a Fel Reaver or something of that nature. So Frostbolt has utility. It shows up in every mage deck, fast and slow, and it has been a core part of the class since the very, very beginning of the game. Up next at the 4 mana slot is a neutral minion that shows up everywhere. This is Iron Beak Owl. It's a 2 mana 2/1, which sounds pretty bad as a raw stat total, but it has an insanely powerful battlecry. Silence a minion. So this is really just the go-to silence card to tech into any deck list ever. Unlike Spellbreaker, which is 4 mana 4/3, this one is much cheaper and efficient, so it's much easier to slot into a turn in regards to mana cost. So you can play an Iron Beak Owl and still do things with your turn. It denies so many powerful minions in this game. It gets through taunts. Silence is such an overpowered effect in Hearthstone. And to bundle it into just a 2 mana card like this one that doesn't have the worst body ever makes this card ridiculously good in so many decks. And that's why Iron Beak Owl is constantly a one-of in a variety of decks. Both aggressive to get through taunts and in control decks just to provide the silence value. At the 3 mana slot, or excuse me, the number 3 slot, these are all 2 mana cards, is Haunted Creeper. This 2 mana minion makes the top 3, not because of its base stat total, of course. As a 1/2, it's not very exciting, but its Death Rattle is incredibly powerful. It summons 2 1/1 Spectral Spiders. So you get 3 minions out of a single card, and it's great when you can split stats across multiple minions. But also, if you add up those stat totals, that really makes this a 3/4 minion for 2 mana, which is unparalleled as total stats for the cost without some sort of penalty. So this card has very little downside, a ton of upside, a huge body attached to it. It's got beast synergy. Death Rattle minions that are sticky like this are good for so many different kinds of decks. They're great in like druids for Savage Roar synergy. They're great with buff decks because you're more likely to have a minion that you can buff. Having minions stick around and stay alive is great. At the 2 mana slot, there's really no other card with as much value packed into it as Haunted Creeper, and that is why it shows up in so many decks time and time again. It's just the ultimate 2-drop that you hope you see. After that, at the number 2 slot is a card by the name of Mad Scientist, another Next Ramus card, much like Haunted Creeper. As you can see, they had some pretty good 2-drops in that adventure. This 2 mana 2/2 has another absurdly strong effect on its card. This time it's a Death Rattle that puts a secret from your deck into the battlefield. This effect is really almost broken in how good it is. So it's really a draw a card effect. You're drawing a card, and you're also putting that card into play immediately. So draw effects are really strong. Anything that it has an immediate impact is really strong. So when you get a Mad Scientist out early and it dies, as a mage, you're getting a 3 mana tempo advantage. You're getting a secret out for free. You're drawing a card. Plus you got a very reasonable 2/2 minion onto the board out of the deal, which is hardly a deficit at all. It might be a 3/2 with no effect. So Mad Scientist not only has a just absurdly strong effect, but the body is strong, and it fits into so many different decks with secrets. Virtually anyone who runs secrets, except maybe paladins, will get value out of Mad Science, and it'll show up in almost every deck. So it's in every Hunter deck, it's in every Mage deck, it's in the occasional Paladin deck as well. It's just so strong and so undeniably powerful and can swing the games so easily if you get it on curve that it's hard to deny the value of Mad Scientist. And then finally, our number 1 2-mana card. To me, I think this is the scariest, the strongest, the best 2-mana minion in the game. You might have a debate, but for me, there's no card I hate seeing more than Knife Juggler. This 2-mana 3/2 is threatening on its own right because of 3 attack. You never want to leave a 3 attack minion on the board for too long. It can just do too much damage, but its effect in particular is what makes Knife Juggler such an absolute monster of a card that shows up in such a wide variety of decks. After you summon a minion, deal 1 damage to a random enemy. So there are so many classes that can summon a lot of minions all at once, particularly in aggressive decks. So Warlocks have like an Implosion that can summon 4 imps. Hunters have Unleash the Hounds that can summon potentially 6 dogs with a Knife Juggler on board. Paladins have Muster for Battle that drops 3 minions onto the board. All of that gives you so much extra value from Knife Juggler, and it adds up so fast that it can just do crazy things. It can shred an enemy board of weak minions. It can hit for tons of damage to the face. It's just an absolute monster threat for a 2-mana card. There's no other 2-mana card that you have to get off the board as soon as possible, lest it just totally ruin your hopes and dreams. So Knife Juggler demands a response. I've seen people fireball Knife Jugglers before because they're just too scared of it. It's a card that you have to remove and have to deal with and have to find an answer for. And any card that demands such a strong reaction, that implies that it's a very, very, very strong card. And that to me is why Knife Juggler is the best 2-mana card in Hearthstone. So there you have it for me. That's my top 10 2-mana cards. If you think I'm crazy, let me know. If I missed something on my list, leave a comment and tell me I'm insane and I missed the best card in the game. I'd love to hear some discussion and some input. If I got my list order all wrong, why don't you let me know? We'll talk about it. But until then, thanks so much for watching, and until next time, game on.